He is from TAXII. Everybody knows Joel. Say, what up, Joel?
What's up, Joel?
All right, Joel's going to talk about sticks, TAXII, something, I guess.
OTX.
Yeah. All right, Joel, you got 15.
Alrighty. So, standard disclaimer. Do not taunt Happy Fun Ball. So some of the key problems we run into doing security and trying to defend our users against, the horrors of the multiverse is information sharing. So the only way so far I've seen that we can get accurate information is through a subscription to some type of research firm. So, and for big corporations, that's well and good because you got cash to throw. So you can pay a firm to do your research and give you the down low on the horrible stuff that's coming down the pipe. But as far as like individual small businesses, individual small organizations, school districts, that kind of stuff, where you don't necessarily have a lot of money to throw around, it'd be nice really to be able to get good quality, free threat information. Also, when you're part of a large organization where you have multiple business units, it would be a great idea to be able to share threat information between your various business units. So on that idea is that a key problem that we run into is that we're a day late and $1 short. Threat information has a shelf life, and it's not very long. It lasts for about a day. By the time you get a day-old piece of threat information, it's probably useless. So that's kind of the key problems that we have. Another thing is that we don't want to communicate with each other. A key problem is, like for instance, we have this perceived legal obligation. So in business, you have PCI. Yeah, so there's that big fuzzy thing around PCI. Yeah, that PCI says that you can and can't do certain things, and so you're always questioning. Well, what does PCI have to say about that? And then you talk to your auditor, and the auditor, well, it depends on the auditor you get. So you have that big kind of moral quandary there. Is it kosher? And then then you have if we share this threat information, our competitor's going to get the drop on us for somehow or something like that. Or if we admit this, are we opening ourselves up to litigation? You got a bunch of that stuff floating around. And it really kind of causes problems. It clogs up the flow of information. Because when one organization gets hit with some of the crap, then it would be nice to get a heads up from to the rest of the community and getting heads up from the rest of the community telling you that this is going on and this is what people are seeing on the field. Then you have the problem of, so if we're in the mood to communicate with business partners and the public at large, well, how do we do that? Then you get into, we get this information, somebody sent us an email or a news article, and so how do we translate that into a Snort IDS signature, or how do we get that into the Cisco intrusion prevention system, or Brand X intrusion system, that kind of stuff. There isn't really a common lingo out there. I mean, you get an email, you get a link or something like that, and it's kind of hard to work with. And then once again, it's time sensitive. So how do you get this information from point A to point B quickly and accurately and in a way that people can understand and work with? So one of the solutions that's come out there, and there's a lot of solutions out there. These are just a few, and these are open standards. So you got CyBox, which is the Cyber Observable Expression, which is kind of the formatting of the actual threat information, and then Sticks, which is an XML format, you can put it all in, and then TAXII, which is the methodology of sharing that. So if you know what RSS is, an RSS feed, you get a news feed off our website. That's a means of aggregating news to different websites in a fairly quick, automated fashion. That's what TAXII is. So you go through and you build your threat object with threat actors, that kind of stuff, and then you publish it, just like you would an RSS feed. So that's the beauty of TAXII. And so anybody and everybody can use this, and then Recently, Oasis has taken over this open standard and is pushing forth a new version of it that should be a lot easier to use. So that's kind of overview of one of many ways to share information. So Stix contains a bunch of different, very nicely colored icons that describe different parts of the threat. You have the threat actor, which is the actual potential bad guy. Now, very rarely do we have an actual name to face. You can't really get an attribution on the internet. It's really hard. But you can generalize. So based off of the location of the IP address, based off of all the information that you're able to gather about this person, you can come to a certain amount of conclusions. And so there's been a number of authors that have proposed ways of a naming convention so that we can say, let's see here, Panda is for China, so certain types of Chinese attacks will be, for instance, against governments. Sometimes they'll be against commerce or something like that. And so they'll be given whimsical names such as Cranky Panda or something like that. And so you'll have these generic threat actor definitions that you can attribute to that while you're still researching and trying to put names together. Exploit targets, that's what they're shooting for. That's what they're targeting. Course of action is how they propose you should remedy the situation. An incident describes an actual attack. An indicator contains multiple observables. So an observable would be an IP address, an email, a DNS name, something like that, that you can be able to identify the potential attacker being attacked by. TTP is the type of attack. And then a campaign is that if you have a threat actor that's been doing a lot of this over time, then you can take a look at the threat actor and say, well, we've been able to attribute it to these set of IP addresses. This set of attacks has come from here, so we have several different campaigns that we can attribute to this threat actor. An example of this would be from the Ramones. So we have this brat problem, and constantly getting up on your back and beating you. And so we've attributed to the threat actor as brat. So the incident that they mentioned specifically is that a brat like that on your back, then their TTP is assault and battery. The indicator is a surprise physical attack. An observable is targeting blind spot in the target's back, and observable size 9 cowboy boots. The target was unsuspecting punks. And then course of action, which is apply a baseball bat 3 or more times. So there's some open tools out there on how to properly, that will make use of transmitting and receiving information from Stix and TAXII. Soltra, open source project, and then you can get open source threat feeds from hailataxi.com. Soltra Edge is a virtual machine that you can run. And hailataxi is you can just get your threat feeds from there. So there's multiple threat feeds that they provide. Alien Vault has a service called the Open Threat Exchange. The idea is that it's a web site, and then you can set up an account there, and then you can create your threat objects based off of articles and observables and that kind of stuff. And then it allows you to share it out kind of like you would a blog. So it's different from Stix, although it can contain information from Stix. So the nice thing about it is it has a really nice web interface where you're able to build threat objects pretty easily just by putting in an article, and it scans the article for file signatures and IP addresses and DNS stuff, and then you can build it pretty easily from there. Then you can make use of it using some of their developer tools, and then also they have some scripts that you can run that can convert it into Stix or Snorkel users. Potentially, some of the ways you can export this information, you can dump it into OSIM, which is an open source security information manager, Suricata rules, Bro IDS rules, TAXII feed like I mentioned earlier. And so you can get an API key once you create an account there, and then you can make use of that. You can also find more information about threat intelligence tools at this GitHub address for H/Slatton. It contains information about tools and frameworks that you can use and some reference materials. That's something that Corey had given me, so if you have any questions, we'll be able to help too. Common problems when you run into threat information, especially community stuff, is you have problems with loops where so you have a feed that references somebody else's feed that references somebody else's, and then you start having feed loops and lots of replay problems. So that's something to keep in mind when you're trying to get threat information. You need to vet the sources, make sure it's accurate. And then things that will help inspire communication is that you have a CISA law 2015, and it has liability protections for sharing threat information between organizations. So if legal says, I don't know about that, you can say, well, we're protected under CISA. And then TAXII allows for you to transmit information between business units privately, so point to point. So you don't share something automatically to the internet, you can target who it goes to. Go blue team! Woo! All right, so problems we talked about: untimely communication of threats, lack of common terminology, and worry about liability, and potential solutions, TAXII, OTX, and some of the new automated tools. I'll open the floor up for discussion items. Any questions? Yeah.
So Booz Allen and others have promoted this indicators of compromise kind of thing, the military whatever group. That would be maybe a part of STIX or later into STIX, or is it a separate initiative? Are they related?
I'm not familiar. I know that there's a couple different threat analysis things, like the stoplight system, I think. One of them was TLP. So there's a couple things like that. I know Soltra includes some of those things in addition to STIX and TAXII. So that would be something to take a look at there, but I'm not familiar with that.
There's OpenIOC, be another
OpenIOC.
one.
Yeah. There's lots of.
But you might want to talk about something that you can put down. Yeah. So one thing that with Oasis taking over, they're looking at a JSON format. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So anybody who's actually worked with XML, it is a bitch. I mean, let me tell you, if you want to change the format or something like that, or add in variables, it is just unforgiving. JSON is a lot easier to use, and potentially you can dump it right into JavaScript, which means that you can have a lot of browser-side processing, or potentially use a lot of not server-based solutions to be able to aggregate that and view it and display it and work with it. So that's definitely a good move on their part, I believe. Then working with false positives from sources, that's another issue. So you have the social media vote up or vote down kind of thing going on. So OTX has that, where you can subscribe to a feed or unsubscribe. And so you can kind of get an idea of what the quality of the feed is based off of that. TAXII feeds, it just depends on who's doing that, and how you rate a feed or something like that. I haven't really looked that far into it. But any other questions?
Are all those feeds private?
The feeds, they don't have to be private. So you can have you can mark a threat as a public code white. It's a color code system. So white is public, so free to give out to anybody. If you set it as yellow, it means just amongst the people I want, and then if you mark it as red, it means only goes to the person who is meant to be sent to. So it gets into when you have this sharing inside of an organization, you can flag it to only go to the intended recipient, or you can flag it for general distribution. So you have that ability to mark something and make kind of like document classification. So something like that. Other questions?
What about
30 seconds.
craft?
How do you
How do you not turn this thing into a water hose that you're drowning from?
That is a real problem. Biggest problem I've seen isn't really identifying quality so much as dealing with the quantity. And you have a lot of open source solutions out there, and they're great, but they just can't handle the amount of traffic they're feeding. Soltra, if you open up the floodgates on that, it'll kill it. I mean, it can dump into the database easily, but when you try to do any type of filters or transports or exports, it dies. Just because they don't know how to program right. So they just shove it all into memory until it runs out of memory and fills the process.
All right, everybody, that's time. Let's hear it for Joel. Good job, Joel.